Thundercloud. Welcome to Chillin Tuesday here at Seahorse Medicine Cafe, the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame. On this 8th of July 2025, let's have some poetry games. Well, not really. I think I'm just going to do a bit of Banjo Paterson. And what I'm going to do tonight is focus on the poetry of Banjo Paterson in the year 1899, but we will start off with a couple written in 1898. But first of all, the weather on a Chillin Tuesday here in Guyra. Well, it's currently 7.2 degrees. That feels like 1 outside. And overnight, it's going to get down to 3. Tomorrow's maximum will be 13. And a little overcast and cloudy. Yes, that's the weather. But first, a poem from Thundercloud. Where is he? Boom, here. All right, so the Poetic Fishy fairy tale. The story behind this is, well, I was at the TroutFest AGM last night, and when poetry presents itself, it could be at any moment, but it needs to be acted on. And even if that means writing it on a dinner napkin during the Guyra TroutFest AGM, the final verse and the edits were added a little bit later when I got home that evening. And the AI image generated from it was from Meta. But it was a poetic, fishy fairy tale by Thundercloud and inspired by fairy someone or other who's supposed to be coming to the Trout Festival anyway, fairy Thelma or Louise, I don't know, something. But this is the poetic fishy fairy tale by Thundercloud. Fairy Bob had a great big wand, which sparkled and shone, of which he was fond. He'd wave it and whoosh it, and out flew a fire sparkles, which set fire to the forest. Oh, what a debacle. Fairy Mary was very contrary. Her wand was all spiky, curly, and hairy. She'd wave it and whoosh it, swishing and wishing to catch lots of trout when she'd go trout fishing. When Fairy Mary met Fairy Bob, they rubbed their wands together for a special job. They gave a magic shout, put the forest fire out, put both wands in the water, and each caught a magic trout. Fairy Bob and Mary Fairy made a wish, the very best, that they would make the very best ever Guyra TroutFest. They both waved their magic stick, wished for good music. The music program at the Trout Fest was fantastic, fully sick. And one more. It's a dig at socialism and communism. I'm an engineer, he said, put his neck on the line and he lost his head. Trained to follow procedure. Despite latent evidence to the contrary, step 1, lay on the line and be very obedient, subservient. Never believe your ears or eyes, but lies are truth, and now he lies beneath a guillotine without his head. But I'm an engineer, he said to Stalin, Lenin, Chairman Mao. They couldn't stand him anyhow, the way he'd grovel and bow. But I'm an engineer. I made pumpkin scones this week. Took me back to grade 6, really. Reminded me of Miss Fay's 6A class of 1981 when I won a prize for a Queensland Day poem. It goes something like this. Queensland, Joe's land, the land of sun and heat, where we take our shoes and socks off and go to school bare feet. Queensland, Queensland, laying in the sun. Don't forget your hat, skin cancer's no fun. Right, on with the show and the banjo poetry from 1898 and 1899. The first one I got for you is called Tyson. And everyone is like a capital letter with dots, full stops, periods, whatever you want to call them. Tyson, James Tyson, 1891 to 1898, was a famous Australian pastoralist. He did not become successful until 1851, when he drove cattle to the diggings in Bendigo and opened a butcher's shop near the goldfields. In 4 years, he saved enough money to buy several properties. He continued to buy land, always keeping a close watch on his investments, and in 1892 took up £250,000 worth of Queensland Treasury bills. Tyson never married and died intestate, leaving an estate worth £2.5 million. Mount Tyson in Queensland is named after him. Across the Queensland borderline, the mobs of cattle go. They travel down in sun and shine on dusty stage and slow. The drivers riding slowly on to let the cattle spread will say, here's one old landmark gone, for old man Tyson's dead. What tales there'll be in every camp by men that Tyson knew. The swagman meeting on the tramp will yarn the long day through and tell of how he passed as brown and fooled the local men. But not for me, I struck the town and passed the message further down. That's Tyson. There stands a little country town beyond the border line, where dusty roads go up and down, and banks with pubs combine. A stranger came to cash a cheque. Few were the words he said. A handkerchief about his neck, an old hat on his head. A long grey stranger, eagle-eyed. You know me, of course you do. It's not my work, the boss replied, to know such tramps as you. Well, look here, mister, don't be flash, replied the stranger then. I never care to make a splash. I'm simple, but I got the cash. I'm Tyson. But in that last great drafting yard, where Peter keeps the gate, and souls of sinners find it barred, and go to meet their fate, there's one who ought to enter in for good deeds done on earth. Such deeds as merit ought to win, kind deeds of sterling worth. Not by the straight and narrow gate, reserved for wealthy men, but through the big gate opened wide. The grizzled figure, eagle-eyed, will travel through, and then old Peter'll say, we'll pass him through. There's many a thing he used to do, good-hearted things that no one knew. That's Tyson. And that was published in the Australasian Pastoralists Review on the 15th of December, 1898. The next thing that Banjo wrote was a short story called The Cyclone, Paddy Cahill and the GR. But I'm not going to read that to you. We're going to go straight to his next poem, John Riley's Cow, a ballad of Federation. Yes, well, the next one we got here is a ballad of Federation. We're going to have a sip of chamomile tea out of my Australian Poetry Hall of Fame cup first. Delicious. You can get these Australian Poetry Hall of Fame mugs here at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame. I think you can also get them on the website as well. Oh, hey, what else have I got? Well, I did a Trout Festival poem earlier, and here is our WTF Trout. Where's the fish? Guyra Trout Festival. Tea towel? Yes, but wait, there's more. There's not just Guyra Trout Festival tea towels. Have a look at this. The Banjo Paterson Waltzing Matilda tea towel with Waltzing Matilda on it. There you go. The original version that he wrote first, not the bastardized version. And the tea towel with the cover of the music page written by Murray Cowan for the Banjo Paterson verse song poem Waltzing Matilda. So, yes, here they're both these tea towels are available from the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame here in Guyra, my design, and yeah, Done. Johnny Riley's Cow, a ballad of federation. Come all you federationists and hearken to me now. I've a story will instruct you very highly. 'Tis a free selector and his federation cow, and the free selector's name was Johnny Riley. He was farming 40 acres on the upper Murray side where the river's very shallow and it isn't very wide. And his cow could cross the river every single time she tried. Bad scran to such a cow, said Johnny Riley. Sure, I belong to Sydney side, and when she goes across, 'tis a loss to New South Wales, said Johnny Riley. Are all the Sydney merchants to be saddled with a loss to propitiate a cow, said Johnny Riley? For she splashes through the river just to feed on foreign ground and never pays the tax at all, be jabbers, I'll be bound. Although them darn Victorians about £1,000 in fines for that there cow, said Johnny Riley. And I'm down on Federation, it will cripple New South Wales, but the cow don't seem to care, said Johnny Riley. For what will come to Sydney if the Murray traffic fails and the Riverina trade, said Johnny Riley. I've argued and expounded, but they can't be made to see that it makes no shade of odds at all to folks like you and me. The Sydney landlords may be hurt, but what's the odds, he said. She's a narrow-minded cow, said Johnny Riley. You see, the cow is Queensland bred and doesn't care a pin if the Sydney rents or Melbourne's rise more highly. To keep our country's union back for landlords is a sin. That's the verdict of the cow, said Johnny Riley. It's Australia for Australians, one people east and west, and all may do as I do, travel where the grass is best. Free trade with one another and protection from the rest. She's a narrow-minded cow, said Johnny Riley. So, here's luck to Johnny Riley and his Federation cow, their example we should value very highly. Twixt Melbourne town and Sydney, it's a narrow-minded row, for the trade is none so much, said Johnny Riley. If Sydney gets the capital and Melbourne gets the trade from Riverina stations, well, a fair exchange is made. And the 20 yards of river will no longer be afraid when we cross it, says the cow to Johnny Riley. And that was written in 1898, still 3 years before Federation, when there were crazy taxes and tariffs and barriers between travel and trade between states in Australia, or colonies as they were called back then. And Federation was to get rid of those, I think, under Section 92 of our Constitution. Section 92 of the Australian Constitution. Section 92 of the Constitution, which falls under chapter 4 of the Australian Constitution, says this: trade within the Commonwealth is to be free. On the imposition of uniform duties of customs, trade, commerce, and intercourse among the states, whether by means of internal carriage or ocean navigation, shall be absolutely free. So Section 92 of the Australian Constitution in Chapter 4 says this: trade within the Commonwealth is to be free, or to be free. And the imposition of uniform duties of customs, trade, commerce and intercourse among the states, whether by means of internal carriage or ocean navigation, shall be absolutely free. So uniform duties of custom. I wonder, trade, commerce and intercourse among the states shall be absolutely free. So if one state has higher stamp duties than another, is that like a different duty? If like they stopped you travelling between states during COVID shall be absolutely free. Wasn't that like anti-constitutional? Would appear to be that, yeah, by the means of internal carriage or open ocean navigation shall be absolutely free. Intercourse among the states, yeah, shall be free. Looks like that during COVID that the governments were doing something anti-constitutional. That's how it would appear. All right, well, let's get on with, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I can read. Let's get on with Saltbush Bill's Gamecock. Gamecock? Yes. Saltbush Bill's Gamecock. It was Saltbush Bill with his travelling sheep was making his way to town. He crossed them over the Hard Times Run and he came to the Take 'em Down. He counted through at the boundary gate and camped at the drafting yard. For Stingy Smith of the Hard Times Run had hunted him rather hard. He bore no malice to Stingy Smith, was simply the hand of fate that caused his wagon to swerve aside and shatter old Stingy's gate. And being only the hand of fate, it follows without a doubt it wasn't the fault of Saltbush Bill that Stingy's sheep got out. So Saltbush Bill, with an easy heart, prepared for what might befall, commenced his stages to take 'em down the station of Rooster Hall. 'Tis strange how often the men out back will take to some curious craft, some ruling passion to keep their thoughts away from the overdraft. And Rooster Hall of the Take 'em Down was widely known to fame as breeder of champion fighting cocks. His forte was the British game. The passing stranger within his gates that camped with old Rooster Hall was forced to talk about fowls all night, or else not talk at all. Though droughts should come and though sheep should die, his fowls were his sole delight. He left his shed in the flood of work to watch two gamecocks fight. He held in scorn the Australian game, that long-legged child of sin. In a desperate fight with the steel-tipped spurs, the British game must win. The Australian bird was a mongrel bird with a touch of the jungle cock. The want of breeding must find him out when facing the English stock. For British breeding and British pluck must triumph it over all, and that was the root of the simple creed that governed old Rooster Hall. 'Twas Saltbush Bill to the station road ahead of his travelling sheep, and sent a message to Rooster Hall that wakened him out of his sleep. A crafty message that fetched him out and hurried him as he came. A drover has an Australian bird to match with your British game. 'Twas done and done in half a trice, a £5 note aside. Old Rooster Hall with his champion bird and the drover's bird untried. Steel spurs, of course, said old Rooster Hall, you'll need 'em without a doubt. You stick the spurs on your bird, said Bill, but mine fights best without. Fights best without, said old Rooster Hall, he can't fight best unspurred. You must be crazy, but Saltbush Bill said, wait till you see my bird. So Rooster Hall to his fowl yard went, and quickly back he came, bearing a clipped and shaven cock, the pride of his English game. With an eye as fierce as an eagle hawk and a crow like a trumpet call, he strutted about on the garden walk and cackled at Rooster Hall. Then Rooster Hall sent off a boy with word to his cronies too, McRae, the boss of the Black Police, and the Father Donahue. Full many a cockfight old McRae had held in his empty court, with Father D as a picker-up, a regular all-round sport. They got the message of Rooster Hall and down to his run they came, prepared to scoff at the drover's bird and bet on the English game. They hied them off to the drover's camp while Saltbush Bill rode before. Old Rooster Hall was a blithesome man when he thought of the treat in store. They reached the camp where the drover's cook, with countenance all serene, was boiling beef in an iron pot, but never a fowl was seen. Take off the beef from the fire, said Bill, and wait till you see the fight. There's something fresh for the bill of fare. There's game fowl stew tonight. For Mr. Hall has a fighting cock, all feathered and clipped and spurred, and he's fetched him here for a bit of sport to fight our Australian bird. I've made a match that our pet will win, though he's hardly a fighting cock. But he's game enough, and it's many a mile that he's trampled with the travelling stock. The cook he banged on a saucepan lid, and soon as the sound was heard, under the dray in the shadows hid, a something moved and stirred. A great tame emu strutted out, said, Saltbush, here's our bird. But Rooster Hall and his cronies too drove home without a word. The passing stranger within his gates that camps with old Rooster Hall must talk about something else than fowls if he wishes to talk at all. For the record lies in the local court and filed in its deepest vault that Peter Hall of the Take 'em Down was tried for a fierce assault on a stranger man who in all good faith and prompted by what he heard had asked old Hall if a British game could beat an Australian bird. And old McRae, who was on the bench as soon as the case was tried, remarked, discharged with a clean discharge. The assault was justified. Written and published in 1898. Yes. The assault was justified. Apparently so. All right, the next one. So we move into March 1899 now, and this one's called The Matrimonial Stakes. Now, Banjo, I know he was engaged to marry someone. I'm not sure whether he did. He was a bit of a philanderer, I believe. He was a ladies' man. But let's just read the poem, and we won't make judgments because we don't really know. The Matrimonial Stakes. I wooed her with a steeplechase. I won her with a fall. I made her heartstrings quiver on the flat when the pony missed his take-off and crashed into the wall. Well, she simply had to have me after that. It awoke a thrill of interest when they pulled me out for dead from beneath the shattered ruins of a horse. And although she looked indifferent when I landed on my head in the water, it appealed to her, of course. When I won the Flappers flat race, it was all Sir Garnier, for she praised the way I made my final run. And she thought the riding won it, for how could the poor girl know that a monkey could have ridden it and won? Then they weighed me in a winner. It's not often that occurs, so I didn't let my golden chances slip, for I showed her all the blood marks where I jabbed him with the spurs, and the whip strokes where I hit him with the whip. Then I asked her if she loved me, and she seemed inclined to shirk for a moment, so I took her by the head, so to speak, and rushed her at it, and she seemed to like the work when she kissed me, though she blushed a rosy red. She's a mouth as soft as velvet, and she plenty has of heart. I could worship every little step she takes, and the saddle bell is ringing, so we're going to the start. Certain winners for the Matrimonial Stakes. That was published in the Bulletin on the 11th of March, 1999. All right, this is the Sydney Cup 1899, an outside tip. So there's a bit of a note at the bottom. The Sydney Cup, the Yattendons were the descendants of a famous racehorse. The cup was won by Diffidence. Bobadil was a non-starter, and Crosslake finished 11th in a field of 23. Sydney Cup 1899, an outside tip. Of course, they all say if this Bombadil starts, he'll settle them all in a flash. For the pace he can go will be breaking their hearts. And he ends with the Bombadil dash. But there's one in the race, is a fancy of mine. Whenever the distance is far, Cross Lake is inbred to the Yattendon line, and we know what the Yattendons are. His feet are his trouble, they're tender as gum, if only his feet are got straight. If the field were all Bobadils, let 'em all come, so long as they carry the weight. For a 3-year colt with a 9-3 on his back, well, he needs to be rather a star, and with 7 stone 10, we will trust the old black, for we know what the Yattendons are. He is sired by Lochiel, which ensures that his pace is enough and a little to spare. But the blood that will tell at the end of the race is the blood of the Yattendon mare. And this Bobby will find when the whips are about, it's a very fast journey and far. And there's just the least doubt, will he battle it out? But we know what the Yattendons are. In the rest of the field, there are some that can stay and a few that can fly while they last. But the old black outsider will go all the way and finish uncommonly fast. If his feet last him out to the end of the trip, barefooted or shod with a bar, if he once gets this Bombadil under the whip, then he'll show what the Yattendons are. The Bulletin, 25th of March, 1899. The next one, the Federal Bus Conductor and the Old Lady. Now hurry, Mrs. New South Wales, and come along of us. We're all a-goin' riding in the Federation bus. A family party, don't you know? Yeah, Queensland's coming too. You can't afford it, go along. We've kept box seat for you. The very one of all the lot that can afford it best, you'll only have to pay your share, the same as all the rest. You say your sons is working men and can't afford to ride. Well, all our sons is working men are smoking up outside. You think you might be drove to smash by some unskilful bloke. Well, ain't we all got necks ourselves? And we don't want 'em broke. To bet your life we're not such fools, but what we'll do our best to keep from harm, for harm to one is harm for all the rest. Now, don't go trudging on alone, but get aboard the trap, that basket labelled Capital. You'll take it in your lap. It's nearly time we made a start, so let's have no more talk. You hurry up and get aboard, or else stop out and walk. We've got a flag, we've got a band, our horses travel fast. Oh, right away, Bill, let 'em go. The old un's coming at last. Published in the Bulletin, 17th of June, 1899. So the basket labelled Capital. Capital refers to the site of the federal capital, the choosing of which was a major topic of issue. And they decided on Canberra eventually, didn't they? The next one here, the Reverend Molyneux, which is a French-looking name, Mullineux. The Reverend Molyneux. I reckon his weight at 8 stone 8 and his height at 5'2", with a face as plain as an 8-day clock and a walk as brisk as a bantam cock, game as a bantam too, hard and wiry and full esteem. That's the boss of the English team, the Reverend Molyneux. Makes no row when the game gets rough. None of your strike me blue. Yous want a smacking across the snout. Plays like a gentleman out and out, such as he ought to do. Kindly remove from off my face. That's the way that he states his case. Reverend Molyneux. Kick, he can kick like an army mule. Runs like a kangaroo. Hard to get by as a lawyer planned. Tackles his man like a bulldog ant. Fetches him over too. Didn't the public cheer and shout watching him chucking big blokes about? Reverend Molyneux. Scrimmage was packed on his prostrate form. Somehow the ball got through. Who was it tackled our big half-back, flinging him down like an empty sack right on our goal line too? But the man that we thought was dead, right with the score of 'em on his head, Reverend Molyneux. And that was published in the Bulletin the 24th of June, 1899. Next one's a story about polio. And here we go. The rule of the AJC, which is the Australian Jockey Club, whose rules had just recently been amended when he wrote this poem. Come all ye bold trainers, attend to my song. It's a rule of the AJC. You mustn't train ponies, but that's very wrong by the rules of the AJC. You have to wear winkers when crossing the street for fear that a pony you'd happen to meet, if you hear one about, you must beat retreat. That's the rule of the AJC. And all ye bold owners will find without fail by the rules of the AJC, the jockey boy's fees you must pay at the scale. It's the rule of the AJC. When your horse wins a fiver, you'll laugh, I'll be bound, but you won't laugh so much by the time that you've found that the fee to the boy is exactly £10. That's a rule of the AJC. And all ye bold books who are keeping a shop in the rules of the AJC, there's a new regulation that says you must stop. That's a rule of the AJC. You must give up your shop with its pipes and cigars to an unlicensed man who is thanking his stars while you go and bet in the threepenny bars. That's a rule of the AJC. And all ye small jockeys who ride in a race, in the rules of the AJC, if owner's instructions are don't get a place by the rules of the AJC, you must ride the horse out, though of course if you do, you'll get no more mounts. It's starvation to you. But bless you, you'll always find plenty to chew in the rules of the AJC. The first surveyor, his widow speaks. The opening of the railway line, the governor and all, with flags and banners down the street, a banquet and a ball. Hark to 'em at the station now, they're raising cheer on cheer, the man who brought the railway through, our friend the engineer. They cheer his pluck and enterprise and engineering skill. 'Twas my old husband found the pass behind that big red hill. Before the engineer was grown, we settled with our stock. Behind that great big mountain chain, a line of range and rock. A line that kept us starving there in weary weeks of drought, with ne'er a track across the range to let the cattle out. 'Twas then, with horses starved and weak and scarcely fit to crawl, my husband went to find a way across that rocky wall. He vanished in the wilderness, God knows where he was gone. He hunted till his food gave out, but still he battled on. His horses strayed, 'twas well they did, they made towards the grass, and down behind the big red hill they found an easy pass. He followed up and blazed the trees to show the safest track, then drew his belt another hole and turned and started back. His horses died, just one pulled through, and with nothing much to spare. God bless the beast that brought him home. the old white Arab mare. We drove the cattle through the hills along the newfound way, and this was our first camping ground, just where I live today. Then others came across the range and built the township here, and then there came the railway line, and this young engineer, he drove about with tents and traps, a cook to cook his meals, a bath to wash himself at night, a chainman at his heels, and that was all the pluck and skill for which he's cheered and praised. For after all, he took the track, the same my husband blazed. My poor old husband dead and gone, with never feast nor cheer. He's buried by the railway line. I wonder, can he hear? When down the very track he marked, and close to where he's laid, the cattle trains go roaring down the 1 in 30 grade. I wonder, does he hear them pass, and can he see the sight when through the dark the fast express goes flaming by at night? I think 'twould comfort him to know there's someone left to care. I'll take some things this very night and hold a banquet there. The hard old fare we've often shared together, him and me, St. Damper and a bite of beef, a pannikin of tea. We'll do without the bands and flags, the speeches and the fuss. We know who ought to get the cheers, and that's enough for us. What's that? They wish that I'd come down, the oldest settler here, present me to the governor and that young engineer. Well, just you tell his excellence, and put the thing polite. I'm sorry, but I can't come down. I'm dining out tonight. The Lost Leichhardt, an English scientific society, is fitting out a pioneering party to search for traces of the lost explorer Leichhardt. Another search for Leichhardt's tomb, though 50 years have fled since Leichhardt vanished in the gloom, our one illustrious dead. But daring men from Britain's shore, the fearless bulldog breed, renew the fearful task once more, determined to succeed. Rash men that know not what they seek will find their courage tried, for things have changed on Cooper's Creek since Ludwig Leichhardt died. Along where Leichhardt journeyed slow and toiled and starved in vain, those rash excursionists must go per Queensland Railway train. Out on those deserts lone and drear, the fierce Australian black will say, you show it pint of beer, it show you Leichhardt track. And loud from every squatter's door each pioneering swell will hear the wild pianos roar, the strains of Daisy Bell. The watchers in those forests vast will see at fall of night commercial travellers bounding past and darting out of sight. About their path a fearful fate will hover always near, a dreadful scourge that lies in wait, the long-reach horehound pier. And then, to crown this tale of guilt, they'll find some scurvy knave, regardless of their quest, has built a pub on Leichhardt's grave. Ah, yes, those British pioneers had best at home abide, for things have changed in 50 years since Ludwig Leichhardt died. And that was published in the Bulletin on the 14th of October, 1899. The Bottle-O Man. I ain't the kind of bloke as takes to any steady job, but I drives a bottle cart around the town. A man what keeps his eye about need never want a bob. I couldn't bear to work for every brown. There's lots of handy things about in everybody's yard. There's cocks and hens a running to and fro, and little dogs what comes and barks. We takes them off their guard, and we puts them with the empty bottle-o. So it's any bottles, oh. You can hear us shout for half a mile or so. You can see the women rushing to take in the Monday's washing when they hear the cry of, "Empty bottle-o!" I'm driving down by Wexford Street and up a window goes. A girl puts out her head and looks at me. An all right tart with ginger hair and freckles on her nose. I stops the cart and walks across to see. "There ain't no bottles here," she said, "since father took the pledge." "No bottles here," says I'd like to know. "What right you have to stick your head outside the window ledge if you haven't got no empty bottle-o?" I sometimes give the horse a spell, and then the push and me, we takes a little trip to Chowder Bay. Oh, ain't it nice the whole day long a gazing at the sea and a hiding of the tanglefoot away. But when the booze gets hold of us and fellas starts to scrap, there's somewhat like blue metal for to throw. But as for me, I always says for laying out a trap, oh, there's nothing like an empty bottle-o. Published in the Bulletin on the 18th of November, 1899. Now this next one is Driver Smith, published in the Bulletin on the 25th of November, 1899. It's about the Boer War, which was happening in South Africa at the time, and Banjo Paterson actually went off to the Boer War and became a reporter, wrote about it quite extensively. Driver Smith. Because Driver Smith of Battery A was anxious to see a fight. He thought of the Transvaal all the day, he thought of it all the night. "Well, if the battery's left behind, I'll go to the war," says he. "I'll go a-driving an ambulance in the ranks of the AMC. I'm fairly sick of these here parades. It's want of a change that kills, charging the Randwick rifle range and aiming at Surrey Hills. And I think if I go with the ambulance, I'm certain to find a show, for they have to send the medical men wherever the troops can go. Wherever the rifle bullets flash and the Maxims raise a din, it's there you'll find the medical men a-raking the wounded in, a-raking 'em in like human flies, and a driver smart like me will find some scope for his extra skill in the ranks of the AMC. So, Driver Smith, he went to the war a-cracking his driver's whip. From ambulance to collecting base, they showed him his regular trip. And he said to the boys that were marching past as he gave his whip a crack, "You'll walk yourselves to the fight," says he. "Lord spare me, I'll drive you back." Now, the fight went on in the Transvaal Hills for the half of a day or more, and Driver Smith, he worked his trip all aboard for the seat of war. He took his load from the stretcher men and hurried them homeward fast, till he heard a sound he knew full well, a battery rolling past. He heard the clink of the leading chains and the roll of the guns behind. He heard the crack of the driver's whips, and he says to him, "Strike me blind. I'll miss me trip with this ambulance, although I don't care to shirk. Oh, but I'll take a car off the line today and follow the guns to work." Then up the battery colonel came, a-cursing 'em black in the face. "Sit down and shift 'em, you drivers there, and gallop 'em into place." So off the battery rolled and swung, a-going a merry dance, and holding his own with the leading gun goes Smith with his ambulance. They opened fire on the mountainside, a-peppering by and large, when over the hill above their flank the Boers came down at the charge. They rushed the guns with a daring fight, a volley left and right, and Driver Smith with his ambulance moved up to the edge of the fight. For gunners stuck to their guns like men and fought like the wildcats fight, for a battery man don't leave his gun with ever a hope in sight. But the bullets sang and the Mausers cracked and the battery men gave way, till Driver Smith with his ambulance drove into the thick of the fray. He saw the head of the Transvaal troop thundering to and fro, a hard old face with a monkey beard, a face that he seemed to know. Now, who's that leader? Said Driver Smith. I've seen him before today. Why, bless my heart, but it's Kruger's self. And he jumped for him straight away. He collared old Kruger round the waist and he hustled him into the van. It wasn't according to stretcher drill for raising a wounded man, but he forced him in and he said, all aboard, we're off for a little ride. And you'll have a car to yourself, he says. I reckon we're full inside. He wheeled his team on the mountainside and set them a merry pace, a galloping over the rocks and stones. And a lot of Boers gave chase. But Driver Smith had a fairish start and he said to the Boers, good day, you have Buckley's chance for to catch a man that was trained in battery A. He drove his team to the hospital and said to the PMO, beg pardon, sir, but I missed a trip, mistaking the way to go. And Kruger came to the ambulance and asked, could we spare a bed? So I fetched him here and we'll take him home to show for a bob ahead. So the word went round to the English troops to say they need fight no more. For Driver Smith with his ambulance had ended the bloomin' war. And in London now at the music halls he's starring it every night and drawing £100 a week to tell how he won the fight. Published in the Bulletin the 25th of November, 1899. Banjo certainly was a horseman. I guess back in those days there was no option because there weren't any cars, so everyone was riding horses, dependent on horses and carts. And this next one is called Father Riley's Horse. 'Twas the horse thief, Andy Reagan, that was hunted like a dog by the troopers of the Upper Murray side. They had searched in every gully, they had looked in every log, but never sight or track of him they spied, till the priest at Kiley's crossing heard a knocking very late, and a whisper, Father Riley, come across. So his reverence in pyjamas trotted softly to the gate and admitted Andy Reagan and a horse. Now, it's listen, Father Riley, to the words I've got to say, for it's close upon my death I am tonight. With the troopers hard behind me, I've been hiding all the day, in the gullies keeping close and out of sight. But they're watching all the ranges till there's not a bird could fly, and I'm fairly worn to pieces with the strife. So I'm taking no more trouble, but I'm going home to die. 'Tis the only way I see to save my life. Yes, I'm making home to mother's, and I'll die o' Tuesday next, and be buried on the Thursday. And of course, I'm prepared to meet me penance, but with one thing I'm perplexed, and it's, Father, that's this jewel of a horse. He was never bought nor paid for, and there's not a man can swear to his owner or a breeder, but I know that his sire was by pedantic from the old pretender mare, and his dam was close related to the roe. And there's nothing in the district that can race him for a step. He could canter while they're going at their top. He's the king of all the leapers that was ever seen to lep. A 5-foot fence, he'd clear it in a hop. So I'll leave him with you, Father, till the dead shall rise again. 'Tis yourself that knows a good un, and of course you can see he's got by moonlight out of Paddy Murphy's plain, if you've ever asked the breeding of the horse. But it's getting on to daylight, and it's time to say goodbye, for the stars above the east are growing pale, and I'm making home to mother. And it's hard for me to die, but it's harder still is keeping out of jail. You can ride the old horse over to me grave across the dip, where the wattle bloom is waving overhead. Sure, he'll jump them fences easy, you must never raise a whip, or he'll rush 'em now. Goodbye. And he had fled. So they buried Andy Regan, and they buried him to rights in the graveyard at the back of Kiley's Hill. There were 25 mourners who had 25 fights, till the very boldest fighters had their fill. There were 50 horses racing from the graveyard to the pub, and the riders flogged each other all the while. And the lashings of the liquor and the lavings of the grub. Oh, poor Andy went to rest in proper style. Then the races came to Kiley's, with a steeplechase and all, for the folk were mostly Irish round about, and it takes an Irish rider to be fearless of a fall. They were training morning in and morning out, but they never started training till the sun was on the course, for a superstitious story kept them back, that the ghost of Andy Regan on a slashing chestnut horse had been training by the starlight on the track. And they read the nominations for the races with surprise and amusement at the father's little joke, for a novice had been entered for the steeplechasing prize, and they found that it was Father Riley's moke. He was neat enough to gallop, he was strong enough to stay, but his owner's views of training were immense. For the Reverend Father Riley used to ride him every day, and he never saw a hurdle nor a fence. And the priest would join the laughter. Oh, said he, I put him in, for there's 25 sovereigns to be won, and the poor would find it useful if the chestnut chanced to win, and he'll maybe win when all is said and done. He had called him Falabala, which is French for clear the course, and his colours were a vivid shade of green. All the Dooleys and O'Donnells were on Father Riley's horse, while the Orangemen were backing Mandarin. It was Hogan, the dog poisoner, aged man and very wise, who was camping in the racecourse with his swag, and who ventured the opinion, to the township's great surprise, that the race would go to Father Riley's nag. You can talk about your riders, and the horse has not been schooled, and the fences is terrific and the rest. When the field is fairly going, then you'll see you've all been fooled, and the chestnut horse will battle with the best. For there's some has got condition, and they think the race is sure, and the chestnut horse will fall beneath the weight. But the hopes of all the helpless and the prayers of all the poor will be running by his side to keep him straight. And it's what's in need of schooling or of working on the track, when the saints are there to guide him round the course. I've prayed him over every fence, I've prayed him out and back, and I'll bet my cash on Father Riley's horse. Oh, the steeple was a caution, they went hair and round, and the fences rang and rattled where they struck. There was some that cleared the water, there was more that fell in and drowned. Some blamed the men and others blamed the luck. But the whips were flying freely when the field came into view for the finish down the long green stretch of course. And in front of all the flyers, jumping like a kangaroo, came the rank outsider, Father Riley's horse. Oh, the shouting and the cheering as he rattled past the post, for he left the others standing in the straight. And the rider, well, they reckon it was Andy Reagan's ghost, and it beat him how a ghost would draw the weight. But he weighed at 9 stone 7, and he laughed and disappeared like a banshee, which is Spanish for an elf. And old Hogan muttered sagely, if it wasn't for the beard, they'd be thinking it was Andy Reagan himself. And the poor of Kiley's Crossing drank the heath at Christmas tide of the chestnut and his rider dressed in green. There was never such a rider, not since Andy Reagan died. And they wondered who on earth he could have been. But they settled it among 'em, for the story got about amongst the bushmen and the people on the course that the devil had been ordered to let Andy Reagan out for the steeplechase on Father Riley's horse. I just got goosebumps with that. Ooh. The bulletin, the 9th of December, 1899. Ooh, Father Riley's horse, eh? What a cool story, cool poem. Very long. Like these ones of Banjo Paterson's are very long. And the last one I've got here, which is of 1899, is called Investigating Flora. It's 5 pages, this one. Investigating Flora. 'Twas in scientific circles that the great Professor Brown had a worldwide reputation as a writer of renown. He had striven finer feelings in our natures to implant by his treatise on the morals of the red-eyed bulldog ant. He had hoisted an opponent who had trodden unawares on his reasons for bare patches on the female native bears. So they gave him an appointment as instructor to a band of the most attractive females to be gathered in the land. 'Twas a ladies' science circle, just the latest social fad for the nicest people only, and to make their rivals mad, they were fond of science rambles to the country from the town, a parade of female beauty in the leadership of Brown. They would pick a place for luncheon and catch beetles on their rugs. The professor called them optera. They called them nasty bugs. Well, the thing was bound to perish, for no lovely woman can feel the slightest real interest in a club without a man. The professor hardly counted. He was crazy as a loon, with a countenance suggestive of an elderly baboon. But the breath of fate blew on it with a sharp and sudden blast, and the ladies' science circle is a memory of the past. There were 22 members, mostly young and mostly fair, who had made a great excursion to a place called don't know where, at the crossing of Lost River on the road to no man's land, where they met an old selector with a stockwhip in his hand. and the sight of so much beauty sent him slightly off his nut. So he asked them, smiling blandly, would they come down to the hut? I am come, said the professor in his thin and reedy voice, to investigate your flora, which I hear is very choice. The selector stared dumbfounded till at last he found his tongue. To investigate my flora, oh you howling Brigham Young, why you 22 women, regular slap up women too, and you're after little Flora and a crawling thing like you. Oh, you Mormonite gorilla. Well, I've heard it from the first that you wizen fellas is 100 times the worst. But a dried up ape like you are to be marching through the land with a pack of lovely women, well, I cannot understand. You mistake, said the professor in a most indignant tone, while the ladies shrieked and jabbered in a fashion on their own. You mistake about these ladies. I am a lecturer of theirs. I am Brown, who wrote the treatise on the female native bears. When I said we wanted flora, what I meant was native flowers. Well, you said you wanted flora, and I swear you don't get ours. But here's Flora self-a-comin', and it's time for you to skip, or I'll write a treatise on you, and I'll write it with a whip. Now, I want no explanations, just you hook it out of sight, or you'll charm the poor girl somehow. The professor looked in fright. She was 6 feet high and freckled, and her hair was turkey red. The professor gave a whimper and threw down his bag and fled. And the ladies' science circle, with a simultaneous rush, travelled after its professor and went screaming through the bush. At the crossing of Lost River on the road to no man's land, where the grim and ghostly gum trees block the view on every hand, there they weep and wail and wander, always seeking for the track. For the hapless old professor hasn't sense to guide 'em back, and they clutch at one another and they yell and scream in fright as they see the gruesome creatures of the grim Australian night, and they hear the mopokes hooting and the dingoes howl so dread, and the flying foxes jabber from the gum trees overhead, while the weird and wary wombats in their subterranean caves are a-digging, always digging at those wretched people's graves, and the pike-horned Queensland bullock from his shelter in the scrub has his eye on the proceedings of the Ladies' Science Club. Published in the Bulletin on the 9th of December 1899. And yes, I'm thirsty, and this one's called The City of Dreadful Thirst. A stranger came from Narromine and made his little joke. They say we folks in Narromine are narrow-minded folks, but all the smartest men down here are puzzled to define a kind of new phenomenon that came to Narromine. Last summer, up in Narromine, 'twas getting rather warm, 200 in the water bag and looking like a storm. We all were in the private bar, the coolest in the town, when out across the stretch of plain, a cloud came rolling down. Boom! Ha ha ha! Thundercloud it must be, yes. Yeah, well, that's their problem, eh? Next. We don't respect the clouds up there. Ah, well, yeah, see. That's why, that's their problem. We don't respect the clouds up there. They fill us with disgust. They mostly bring a bogan shower, 3 raindrops and some dust. But each man simultaneous like to each man said, I think that cloud suggests it's up to us to have another drink. There's clouds of rain and clouds of dust, we heard of them before. And sometimes in the daily press we read of clouds of war. But if this ain't the gospel truth, I hope that I may burst. That cloud that came to Narromine was just a cloud of thirst. It wasn't like a common cloud. 'Twas more a sort of haze. It settled down about the streets and stopped for days and days. And not a drop of dew could fall and not a sunbeam shine to pierce that dismal sort of mist that hung on Narromine. Oh, Lord, we had a dreadful time beneath that cloud of thirst. We all chucked up our daily work and went upon the burst. The very blacks about the town that used to cage for grub, they made an organised attack and tried to loot the pub. We couldn't leave the private bar no matter how we tried. Shearers and squatters, union men and blacklegs side by side were drinking there and doesn't move for sure. We were drinking there and doesn't move for each for sure, he said. Before he'd get a half a mile, the thirst would strike him dead. We drank until the drink gave out. We searched from room to room. And round the pub like drunken ghosts went howling through the gloom. The shearers found some kerosene and settled down again. But all the squatter chaps and I, we staggered to the train. And once outside the cloud of thirst, we felt as right as pie. But while we stopped about the town, we had to drink or die. But now I hear it's safe enough. I'm going back to work because they say the cloud of thirst has shifted on to Burke. But when you see those clouds about, like this one over here, all white and frothy at the top, just like a pint of beer, it's time to go and have a drink. For if that cloud should burst, you'd find the drink would be all gone. That's a cloud of thirst. We stood the man from Narromine, a pint of half and half. He drank it off without a gasp in one tremendous quaff. I joined some friends last night, he said, in what they called a spree. But after Narromine, it was just a holiday to me. And now beyond the western range, where sunset skies are red and clouds of dust and clouds of thirst go drifting overhead, the railway train is taking back along the western line that narrow-minded person on his road to Narromine. It was also published on the 9th of December 1899 in the Bulletin. The next thing that Banjo was known for is writing the preface to The Term of His Natural Life by Marcus Clarke, of all things. And after that, well, an outback marriage, which is quite a long story. And then Banjo Paterson, he was off overseas to South Africa to report on the Boer War. Well, I'm Thundercloud. That's Chillin Tuesday today, the 8th of July, 2025. It's a long one. Yes, it's been a lot of poetry for the year 1898 and 1899 for Banjo Paterson. And I guess, well, we'll be moving on to the year 1900 soon. All right, I'm Thundercloud. If you've liked what I've done here, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment because it helps the algorithm and it gets the poetry out there. And I'll see you tomorrow night for Wednesday Words, next week for more Chillin' Tuesday and more poetry from the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame. See you later.